I'm going to play a clip from session 1. And I think when you see the people, it's a video, and they've all given consent for this, what's noticeable is how tense their posture is and how anxious they look. They're not making much eye contact. There's not much of a shared rhythmic pulse, and I might say a little bit about that afterwards, why that might be. The clip you see is towards the end of the session, and at the end of it you begin to see more movement. Some people begin to get out of their seats to explore some other instruments, and they're beginning to notice aspects of each other's playing and imitate it, such as trills or tremolos, or moving to a higher or lower pitch. A few things to say before I talk about this session. You probably noticed that the therapist's music was very, very gentle. This is almost as if we were wrapping the group in cotton wool because they were so nervous. But you could probably also see that people were beginning to gain some confidence and feeling that they might like to be a little bit more playful. Something that came up in the group as a theme was the idea of leadership. And in the first session, there was an almost pathological lack of pulse. Nobody seemed to be able to deliver a strong pulse. And we wondered if that was possibly because people wanted to avoid being pushed into some sort of musical forced march, almost, that people might feel compelled to join in with. In the session prior to this one, I began to comment on the fact that if I ever stopped playing, then the rest of the group would instantly stop as well. And I questioned that. And they said, well, it's because you're the leader. So obviously, that's how I was experienced, but I began to suggest that we played around with that idea and that other people took the lead, which some of them were prepared to experiment with, and others absolutely didn't want to. But it did introduce the idea that people could be a bit more dynamic and have a bit more confidence in taking some of their ideas forward. So I think in this session, you'll see that that's beginning to happen. There's a stronger pulse. The therapists are able to play a bit more forcefully. There's still a lot of repetition and stiffness, but I think you'll see the members are less isolated and more able to follow each other. I'm going to move on because of time pressures. I'm going to say a little bit about the session before the end of the group. What happened in this one was that members of the group were playing in pairs and sharing instruments. There was much more creative freedom, and the improvisation ended in a very powerful, shared, synchronized pulse from all members. I'm going to skip over the clip because I want there to be some time for questions. But after this improvisation, I commented how energetic the group were and what I actually hadn't needed to play, I'd stopped. So it's a very different situation from earlier on, where if I stopped playing, everybody fell silent. And what happened after this group? That people began to talk about how satisfying it was to play and what a release they got from drumming. And Jacob said, "A drum can't hit you back," and they all laughed. The members were talking to each other and not just to the therapist. And people began to make reference very gently and subtly to their traumatic experiences, in contrast to the experience they were having in the group. I'm just going to give a little account of the discussion that they had after this improvisation. Jacob said, "I think when you're playing, it gives you something to focus on. You forget everything. You can shut the rest of the world out." I said, "A refuge almost." Joanna said, "I look forward to Friday. I'm sitting around with all of you. This is my safe place on a Friday." Kerry said, "Yeah, safe until you start again. You can be yourself here. It's like you're feeling not like somebody else. I said, it sounds like you're saying that this group can help you feel in yourself, as in embodied, rather than taking yourself out. That's really important. This is somebody who found it so difficult to articulate anything. It's the first statement she'd made, really. And she suffered a great deal from dissociation, of not feeling in her body. She said, when I'm playing, and when I get an instrument and I'm playing it, I feel me again, like I was before everything that happened. When I go out that door, out of there, I feel as if I'm up there again in the clouds watching me. And this got a sort of nodding agreement from several people in the group. And I acknowledged that other people could relate to that. So I'll very quickly say what we thought the changes were for people. It's admittedly a very short period of work, but it's equivalent to what they might get offered in the NHS. That people became more autonomous in the group, they collaborated, they began to make individual choices, and they spoke about their preferences. There's increased group cohesion through finding drumming satisfying and acknowledging what they were experiencing. And, as I said, spontaneous verbal disclosure. Talking about both their experiences outside the group, but in it as well. I think that's probably a suitable place to stop, so that there's time for some questions.